Now, I've been persuaded by our son that it would be a good idea to see if we can get the Commer to fire up, or at least see if there are any signs of life in its overhead valve engine. Now, in the previous video I talked about the engine that's in here, because originally it would have had a side valve 6-cylinder engine, being a 1950 Commer, but in 1951 the factory actually introduced the overhead valve version of the engine, and that is what's in here now. Now, many years ago I did make up a set of leads, sorted the spark plugs out, made up some new leads and got a spark. And I also took the starter motor off and freed that up so that the engine would turn over on the starter. So I think the first thing to do is connect up the battery, which I've charged up overnight, and just see if it will even turn over like it did several years ago. And then if it will, we'll move on from there to the next things that need checking before we can see if there are any chances of this engine actually running or not. So let's go and find where the battery goes. Now that goes underneath the seat, so I'll pop that down here, and I just need to reconnect the negative lead because it's positive earth. So we've got the remains of the earth lead there, which isn't the best in the world, and I've connected up the negative, which goes off to the starter. This is 12 volt, so let's clamber on board. We'll see, see what we've got. So the ignition, there's nothing coming on the light. I think I bypassed that last time anyway. So let's just see. Now on this, it's got a starter button. You literally you'd normally turn the ignition on the key and then press the starter button. So let's just have a go. Right, so that shows us that the engine is not seized, which is good, so it's not suffered in the meanwhile, and the starter is still working, because it's a bit of a pig to get at the starter. So I'm quite pleased that I'm not going to have to take that apart. So we need to now check if there is a spark or not. Really, we need three things in order to get the engine to run. We need the spark, we need fuel getting through, and we need compression to drag the fuel vapour into the cylinders. With those three things all happening at the right moment in time, there's every chance that it should start up. How well it would run, I'm not quite sure, because it's not run in 50 years, but one thing at a time. So I think let's go and have a look at the spark and see what's happening underneath the distributor cap. Right, so Junior's joined me now, and we're going to talk a little bit about the engine. So in here, if I just get this off the cap, we take the cap off. We've got the rotor arm here, which distributes the spark to each of the contacts within the dizzy cap, and then off to the plugs themselves. So we whiz that off. Now, like I say, many years ago I did clean all this up a little bit, so we need to see if there's any sign of spark at these points here, because that's the first thing to check for. Right, if you get in, and I'll show you where the starter button is. I think the battery's still connected. Right. Okay, you won't need any ignition at the moment.
Doing this.
Yeah, that was many years ago when we actually put it here, wasn't it? You're a lot smaller then. Right, so the starter button has been put down there underneath the dash. So when I say go, I need to connect up the ignition here. I'm just going to jury rig the wiring. When I say go, press the button, I'll spin the engine over and I'll see if there's a spark over at the points. Right, now I seem to remember jury rigging the feed to the coil. So one side of the coil goes straight to the low tension side on the distributor, but we need to get a feed to the coil, and there's no sign of ignition light when you turn the key. So for now we're just going to take the feed from here, because this connects straight to the battery on the starter solenoid over here. So if we whiz that on there, that should give us a feed. There's any sign of sparkage there? Yes, there's a bit of a spark there. So we've got power coming from there now into the coil. Right, if you spin her over and just see if there's any spark at all. Okay, that'll do. Right, so we've still got a spark, so that's good. So later on we'll just give the rotor arm a bit of a clean up, but we've got a spark at the points with this jury rigged feed to the coil, so that's all good. I think the thing we'll do now is take out the plugs and just have another look at those and just see what condition they're in, I did put some oil down the cylinders when I last worked on this, like I say, a few years ago, so that should all be okay. But we'll give the plugs a quick check over, and then we'll clean the contacts in the dizzy cap and then move on from there, I think. What are you up to? Oh no, I was looking at that before. That's pretty cool, isn't it, from its last run out? The old... Yeah, I was looking at that. The old... yeah, from when it was last out. And there's the remains there, the old windscreen pass for Thruxton Circuit. In about 1970, 71, something like that. I mean, it's all exactly as it was left.
How has that tiny piece of paper survived like 50 years?
It's not great. I mean, there's the rest of it on the screen. That's where the rest of it would have been, and it's all fallen off and disintegrated pretty much. But yeah. Right, let's go and get these plugs out then. We'll have a bit of a look. Someone did ask for a tinkering video, so here you go. Right, so what you need to do first is get the pliers and just undo that, just slacken that off a little bit. Grab it with the pliers.
I haven't got a particularly good angle at this.
Yeah, so you just try and grab it as best you can. Yeah, try and go on it sort of straight on as much as you can. So grab it and then twist it anti-clockwise. Right, okay, just so it frees it off. You can do the rest of it with your finger now.
Alright.
So if you take that off, later cars and lorries have the push-on connectors. Yep, so put that somewhere safe so it doesn't disappear. Right, you can whiz that off. Right. Now, unplug spanner. So check to make sure it's like that. Which way is that going? That's tightening it up. So whiz the little lever across. Right. So again, you want to try and go on as square to the thing as possible. Try not to go at an angle. Yeah. I don't know how tight this will be. Is it quite tight?
Probably need some WD-40.
Maybe. Yeah. There you go. There you go. So once you've broken the thread, you know, when you've done that, you can do it with your fingers now. Just pull it off, and it'll come off with your hand now. You should be alright.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, I had these out several years ago, so it should be alright. I was looking at this before in the previous video where I was talking about the Commer, trying to work out what this, and it says blue ribboned power. And this thing here, so was that an oil? Was that a make of oil? Blue ribboned? I'm not quite sure. Maybe someone will know. Right, so you got the plug out. Let's have a look.
Pretty clean, actually.
That's not too bad. So while it's out, we'll do one at a time. But what you have to be really careful of now, when you're tinkering, it's so easy to drop things down there, down the plug hole. So just you have to make sure that you don't drop like the top of the spark plug in or something like that. Especially on the side valve when the spark plugs are on the top of the engine like that, and you take them out and you've got the spark plug hole there, it's so easy for rubbish to fall in, so you just have to be quite mindful of that. So it's always a good idea, unless you're going to spin the engine over with no plugs in just to get some oil around and compression, it's best just to do one at a time, then it minimises the chances of dropping something inside the cylinder, which would be very bad. So we'll go and get a wire brush and we'll just give these a bit of a clean up, I think, but they're not too bad actually. Champion N8s. I think I've got some new ones of those somewhere. Long-termers on the Old Classic Car YouTube channel will know that we went through a similar procedure with the old Talbot and the Morris that we had. So this will be familiar to long-term viewers on here. But if you're fairly new to the channel, or if you just like watching a bit of tinkering, here's a bit of tinkering. So we're just carefully cleaning up the plug contacts here. Being very careful because this white bit is ceramic and that's very easy to snap that off, so you wouldn't put that straight into the jaws of the vise. And then that's not far off at all. We can check the plug gaps afterwards. But they're going to be something like, you know. So only another 5 to go. It's a bit tighter, this one, is it?
Try starting pushing down on it.
Yeah, so there's more than one way to skin a cat. Yeah. Yeah, let's give it a quick whiz.
And then you just do it easily.
Yeah. That's what happens when you do it at an angle. You snap the top of the plug off.
Oh no.
Oh no. There we go. So
Oh.
there's a good example of what not to do.
So ironically, it was you, not me.
It did loosen it. It did loosen it, but at the same time,
I guess that's one way to do it.
took the top of the plug off at the same time. So and we'll have a look in the stock and see if we've got any Champion N8s.
Oh no.
Well, while he takes out spark plug number 3, I'll look for a replacement for spark plug number 2, which I managed to snap off while demonstrating what not to do.
On purpose.
Yes, yeah, of course it was all intentional. So let's have a look in one of these boxes. I know there's various bits and bobs in here. Got spark plug connectors in there. Got some points in there. Various old plugs here. Lodge plugs. Now, there's some loose ones in here. And to be honest, for the purposes of testing, it doesn't really matter what plug it is, as long as it's got the same reach on here. A Champion J8, a Lodge plug, L87, L87, XN8B. N8. It was N8, wasn't it? It was N8, wasn't it? Right, there you go. So there's a new old stock.
Yes, it was.
Right, so here we've got a new old stock.
Oh, do you want me to put that back in?
Yeah, so it's even got the little cardboard protector on it. There you go. So
I've got one in my room.
okay. So there you go.
An empty
Shiny new one. So that's an N8. Yeah. It's got a new thingy in there as well, so you can use that as well. So you can whiz that into number 2.
Oh, the little cap on the top.
Yeah, so you can pop that back in there now. Like I said before, if this was an alley head, you'd probably put a little bit of copper grease on the threads, but as it's an iron head, you should be alright. So always start it by hand, just so that there's no chance of cross-threading it. I bet you'd rather be doing your homework now, wouldn't you?
No.
No?
I enjoy messing around with it.
Good. And if the Commer stays here much longer, you'll be able to rebuild it yourself.
Will I?
Yes. Well, that'd be a nice little project, wouldn't it?
Thanks.
Ace mechanic at work.
Oh, actually, I've got a question.
Go on.
How do I get to
Well, you've got nice slim arms. You've got slim
do I?
down there.
Yes.
You'll get in there. I got in there. I got in there to change it, so you'll get in there. So which one are you putting back in now? Number 3?
This one.
Third
I'm
one.
just putting the spark plug in.
Right. Okay.
I'll probably use this now.
Yes. You're young and agile. You'll get in there.
Will I?
Yeah. Well, you've got more chance than I have. Don't forget to check out Junior's Car Traction, or one word, YouTube channel. Like and subscribe, yes indeed. But not before you finish watching this video, of course. And if you like classic lorries, check out some of the other videos that are also on this channel, because there are plenty of them now. We've never had this Commer running, so if we can get it to run, that'll be fantastic. But one step at a time, I think. You winning?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not sure yet. It feels a bit loose.
Well, while he's doing the spark plugs, I'll have a quick talk about the fuel system now. This has a mechanical pump, which is on the side of the block down here. So this is the feed in. Then we've got a filter built in to the pump here with a glass bowl on the bottom. There's the pump, and that comes up through here into another filter that's been added. So I'm wondering if they had problems with pulling up muck from the tank, even back in the 60s when this was on the road. So that would need cleaning. This would need cleaning out. The line up to the pump would need cleaning out, and probably the tank as well.
Hey.
And then we got it.
Yep.
Splendid. And then it goes from this second filter across here through this hard line and over into the carburetor, which is here. But we can't just go putting fuel straight into the tank because there's going to be muck and old fuel and all sorts of things in there. So I think when we get to that point, we'll just rig up a temporary fuel feed here, a gravity feed straight into the carburetor, like we did on the Morris 8 and the old Talbot, and just see and hope that it's clean enough in here for the fuel to drag through and be drawn through into the cylinders when we spin it over. But it would take quite a long time to clean out all the fuel system and everything, and this really is just to see if we can get the thing to run at all. If it does fire up on a temporary fuel supply, then we can worry about the fuel tank and the pipes and the pump and the filters and so on. But for now, the objective would be just to get fuel into here, possibly even take the top off and just drop the fuel straight in initially, put a squirt down there through the air intake, and just see if there's any signs of life. I think that's the way forward on this particular one, but we need to finish off these plugs, so someone needs to get a wriggle on.
I've cleaned this one up.
Have you?
Also, if I'm going slow.
Oh,
I'm doing my best.
okay. Right, well, we've finished with the spark plugs. They're all good, they're all cleaned up. We've cleaned the points up a little bit more, so even though there was a spark, it should be a little bit better than it was before. Like I say, all this fuel system, the pump down there, extra filter here, etc., pipes, tank, we're going to avoid all that. And all we're going to do is crack open this union here and rig up a vertical gravity, rather, fuel feed into there. And that's combined with a squirt down there, should suffice just to see if we can at least get a cough of life out of the old girl. So Harley's just gone off to see if he can find a 1/4 inch Whitworth spanner, and then we'll give that a go and see if we can rig up a feed directly into there. We found one. That's a bit small. Well, we've got a 1/4 inch Whitworth, so like I say, go at it directly on, not at an angle. And remember, you have to loosen it. So it's probably not been off in quite a long time. So yeah, okay. Try it from this side. It'll be easier because you can pull up from this side a bit. But it is brass, so that's it. Brilliant. So, right, so you can do it by hand now probably. And then what you have to watch is that when you're doing that, it doesn't pull this around. So it's always better not to rush, just do it slowly and carefully. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. So, it's not been off, like I say, for 50 odd years, probably longer than that, because it's not the sort of thing you disturb very often with a running vehicle. So and that'll come out, and there may be a little filter, there might be like a little filter screen on here when you take that out. Yeah, so if you bring that over here, this is like a little filter screen here, you see this? So if you look through, you might be able to see it's all clogged up, but oh, there you go, you can just about see through it there. So we'll give that a bit of a clean, and then we'll rig up a connection into this banjo fitting here. Right, update. So I've rigged up a bit of a temporary fuel feed. I used this union on the Talbot because it had a very similar carburetor to this. So I've rigged that up with a little funnel for now, so a bit of a gravity fuel feed. Now what I am going to do is I've just started removing the pipe that goes into the mechanical fuel pump, because if I leave that connected, it'll pull up the old fuel from the tank. And in fact, come back. Right, just by spinning it over before, you can see as I'm loosening this, there's actually all the old fuel pouring out. You can smell it, stinks. So it shows that the mechanical pump is actually working, and that the line from the tank to here is clear. So that's quite encouraging. But for now, I'm just going to remove this so that the pump will work away, but it won't actually pull up the muck from the tank. Right, okay, well, we've got the temporary fuel feed lined up, got the battery on. I just need to connect up the jury rigged ignition, and I'll put a squirt of fuel in while he spins over the engine. We'll just see if there are any coughs and splutters from the engine. Just put the ignition on. Right, try turning it over a little bit. dripping a bit of fuel out of here. I'll just nip that up a bit. I can smell burning.
Will I need any bottle?
Maybe, but just can you just pop the choke in a bit?
Alright, how far?
About halfway.
Alright. Oh wait, it's run back out.
Right, okay.
It's gone in a bit.
Right, okay, that'll do. Right, so I'll do it here actually. Right, I'll put a drop of fuel in. Alright, give it a spin over. Doesn't seem to be too much sign of life.
Sounded like it was slowing down a bit at the end.
Yeah, it shouldn't need any throttle.
Yeah, just there. I had to pull it back up.
So what's that now?
That's no throttle, I think.
Right, okay. Right, give it another go. I'll just take a plug lead off and just check to make sure we've got a spark as far as the plugs. So I've just dug out my little tester. This is quite a handy little thing, and this will just tell us if we're actually getting a spark as far as the plugs. It's one thing having it at the points, but it may not be getting as far as the spark plugs themselves. There's a very, very faint spark. Let me just have a look at this.
The ignition light dims so much.
The what?
The ignition light dims so much.
Oh, is it on?
Huh?
Is the ignition light on?
Not now, but
No.
when it's turning over.
It didn't show it.
Well, there's a red light.
Alright, just spin that over. Right, yeah, we've got a spark into the plugs. I just think it's fuel not getting through, so there may be a blockage in the carburettor itself, so I'm thinking that's probably the thing to check. In fact, we'll take out one of the plugs and we'll just see if it's getting wet at all. Well, that little test just seemed to prove that at least we've got a spark getting to the plugs, but the fuel isn't getting through. So I think the thing to do is whiz off that carburettor, and I'll give that a bit of a clean out inside and just make sure everything's tickety-boo in there before trying again. In the meantime, we'll go and charge that battery up. I can see also there's a vacuum takeoff on the manifold over there, so I need to make sure that that isn't split. Well, a few days have passed since the last tinkerings under the bonnet of the Commer, and before I packed up for the day, I took off the carburettor. This is the old Stromberg that was on when I got the lorry, and I'm sure that would clean up pretty well. I'm not overly familiar with these particular carburettors, so I think because I have this over here, which is a new old stock carburettor, I think I'm inclined to go with using this one. As you can see, if I just come out into the light a bit, you can see it's never been used, but what I will do, I will just check to make sure that there are the jets and the float inside here, because I know I bought a carburettor Stromberg for Big Dodger and that was being restored, and that was just like a shell of a carburettor. There weren't any internals in it at all. So I'll just whiz this top off and have a quick look in there and just make sure that all the gubbins is inside that should be there. I mean, I don't know if there are jets in there already. I don't know if it's jetted up to suit this particular lorry, or if it's jetted for a car, perhaps one of the big Humbers. I'm not so sure. So at some point, I'm guessing the jets from the old carburetor will probably end up going in here. But for the purposes of just to see if the lorry will actually start, see if the engine will run, because it's not run since about 1970 or 71, whatever's in here, if there are jets already, they will do the job just for the purposes of proving the theory of whether the thing will start or not. So let's go and find a screwdriver to fit these flat head screws here, here and here. So I'll quick peek inside and just see and make sure that everything's right in there before we go any further. And while you're watching this, actually let me know whether these tinkering type videos are actually of interest. One or two people have asked for an update on the tinkering side of things, so that's kind of one of the reasons why I decided to film this tinkering with the Commer that I'm doing at the moment. But actually, the under the bonnet messing around in the garage videos are actually way less popular than the videos of going to shows and so on, so it's a bit of a funny one really, but I do like doing these, and I think some people do get something out of watching this kind of thing, so I'll carry on with it. But yeah, your feedback is always really welcome on this kind of thing. Fortunately, none of the screws appear to be very tight, so I'm wondering if someone's been in here before, which wouldn't surprise me after probably 70 years of being around. So carefully put the screws there, try not to lose anything. As I hinted at a video earlier in the year, the plan for this year was to try and streamline things a little bit. Maybe cut back on the number of vehicles that are around the place, but more importantly than that is try and have fewer different types of vehicle around the place, because the problem you get into then is that you have to learn about every different type of vehicle, and whereas some of them, like the little Fords, I've had on and off for years, things like the Volvo are very much uncharted territory, and I'm trying to sort of simplify things as much as I possibly can. So the Commer will probably end up having to go. That's partly due to the scale of it as much as anything. The Volvo, I'm not too sure about, but the Volvo does kind of go against the trend that I've tried to have for this year of simplifying things and not getting into more complicated cars, or cars that I'm less familiar with that are going to take time to sort of get up to speed on, because I really don't have time for getting up to speed on a lot of this sort of more modern tech, even though it's 50 years old, but it's a lot more modern compared to some of the things in here that I usually spend my time with. So it may be that the Volvo is really not a very good fit, I don't quite know, we'll have to see on that one. But for now, let's just get this carburetor off. So I've taken the 3 screws out of here, out of the top on here, but I also have to slacken off this pipe on the side here, as you can see that one there. So I just need to get a little span and whiz that off, and then the top will come off and we can have a quick look inside and just make sure the floats and everything's in there. Let's have a look, see what's inside here. Slacken this off, just try and get that off without damaging anything. It's always easier said than done with brass. Should have probably slackened this off before I took the screws out actually, but not to worry. Right. The question is there a float in here, or is there not? If there isn't, I've got a bit of disassembly to do on this old one over here. Let's take that out of there. Okay. Try not to drop it. It's a bit of a lump, this carburetor. Oh yeah, I can see a float. There we go. That's all nice and clean in there. I'll just put that somewhere safe-ish. Assume I can find somewhere safe in this chaotic garage. And that's inside the float chamber, which all looks pretty tickety-boo to me. I'm guessing this is that? Accelerator pump, maybe. But the important thing is there's a float in there which doesn't look like it's been used at all. So I'll just have a quick poke around inside there, just make sure everything's in there. It looks like it's all complete. You can see the gauze on that one there. Looks like it's never been used, so that's all quite encouraging. So really I'll just give that a quick check over and pop the lid back on, and it should be good to pop this back onto the truck itself, which should be nice. Right, so just gently pop the lid back on and then connect up that pipe on the outside. So I'll just put the lid on, we'll pop the screws in, but we're not going to tighten them up. I'll just pop the screws in, start them on their threads, just so that they're all lined up. And before this is tightened up fully, we'll make sure that the pipe connects properly from underneath. Because you don't want to be cross-threading it, and with lots of brass threads and things, it can all get a little bit unfortunate if you get too carried away. This is very similar to the job that I did on the Talbot, because I had this just the sort of next size down from this, but basically it was exactly the same in terms of how it worked. So all I need to do is try and get this threaded into there without thing up. This just isn't going at all. I'm not happy with the angle of trying to get that into there. So I think what we're going to do, I've already slackened it off at the other end, so I'm going to take that out because that'll be a lot easier to put in once this is all back together at the top here, because I don't want to risk not sealing properly. I don't want to risk the top of the float chamber not sealing properly, or this cross threading, whereas by comparison reconnecting the bottom end of the pipe there should be fairly easy. So I'm going to take that off altogether, bolt this on, screw this on rather, and then put this in, and with loads of play on the pipe I can be sure that I'll get that in without cross threading it, and then afterwards worry about putting that back in, I think. Well, it's all loosely back on now, so I can tighten it up. To get this pipe on I had to take it off there and there, take all these screws out again, get the pipe in place first loosely, and only then start nipping up these screws. It's a bit of a fiddly one. It'd be even more fiddly if it was on the vehicle itself. So I'll just tighten up these 3 screws a little bit at a time, because you don't want to tighten one of them up fully and then move to the next one, because you risk distorting this. Even though it's got a thick gasket, you don't want to be distorting anything a bit like a cylinder head or something like that. You always sort of do a little bit at a time. And that way you're less likely to mess something up. In theory, it'd be nice if the Commer could be persuaded to run. I don't want to spend too long on it because it's probably not going to be around too long, but it'd be nice to hear it run. Right, so I'll just tighten up the pipe at the top and the bottom, nip these up, and that should do. I'll give it a little bit of a clean up and just see which bits, if any, I need to swap over from the old carburettor over here onto the nice shiny new one. Back in a bit. What I did find is that this bracket at the bottom here, no, there rather, that was slightly bent, so it wasn't allowing this to operate properly. At least all that's now working as it should do, which it wasn't before, because this was bent, which was causing this down here to foul on the side of here, which wasn't great. So maybe it's been dropped at some time, but now it all works as it should do. There is a fair bit of adjustment on these rods here, so I did extend this slightly as well while I was at it, but that appears to work as it should do now, which is good. So I think this is probably ready to go back on the truck, so let's go and do that. Well, at least that's the new carburettor in situ now, so I just need to reconnect the fuel feed up, swap a bit of linkage over just so that this old piece fits on here and replaces that. There's a vacuum takeoff there which does the advance and retard on the distributor. that's about it really, so I think I'll just crack on with that before it starts raining, and then when we get a slightly better day I'll get the battery charged up, and then we'll have another go at seeing if we can fire it up by just pouring some fuel straight into the carburetor, spin it over, jury rig the ignition, and just see if there are any signs of life at all. But I think for now we'll just sort out all the linkages, put a little cover so no rubbish drops down inside this shiny new carburetor, and then wait for a spot of better weather, I think. Well, it's another day, and I've spent a bit more time tinkering under the bonnet of the old Commer, but as yet there's no signs of life, unfortunately. Now I've swapped over the carburetor. There's the old one, and the shiny one's on. Obviously I don't quite know what the setup is on that particular carburetor, but I would expect it to at least fire up or do something, but as yet there's nothing much happening. So I think, I mean, this is a lovely day today, but we are getting a bit back end of the weather, so I think we'll probably mothball this now and probably revisit it in the spring when the weather's a bit more on our side, 'cause it's a chilly old day today. What I have noticed is it spins over well on the starter. We've got a spark. There's a block of wood falling off the roof, and it's also pulling up oil pressure on the gauge just on the starter alone, which, considering it's the old 50-60-year-old oil that's in there, that's probably not bad going. So I think I'll just mothball it all. I'll spray some oil around just to sort of preserve things a little bit, and then probably revisit it in the spring and spend a little bit more time when the days are a bit longer and just see if we can get it running. But I hope this little update on the Commer was of interest, and I'm sorry we've not got it running yet, but maybe in the spring we'll have a bit more of a chance to see if we can get it to fire up at least. There is a bit of a scent of burning fuel in the air when you spin it over on the starter with the ignition on, but not enough for it to catch. I'm not convinced that the fuel's getting through, so probably the next thing to do is actually do a compression test and just see what the compression's like, because even if you've got a spark here and a fuel air mix here, if you haven't got compression here, it's not going to draw that fuel in, and the sparks are just going to spark away to themselves with nothing to burn. And I think it's probably valve related compressions where the work needs to concentrate on next. So anyway, that's just a little update on the Commer so far. Yeah, it's not running yet, but hopefully it will do soon. Please check out some of the other videos on the channel, including cars, lorries and so on, and more videos along very, very soon. Bye for now.